Good morning, everyone. I was a bit apprehensive when I heard my friend Michelle Maina say that he was a bit nervous. And given that he has more experience than I am in this field, I was so sure that I would be trembling by the time I'm done with this small presentation. Maybe there is an official of the special bank in this room, and we don't know. Let me start by saying that I generally concur with everything that the speakers before me have said. I will focus mostly on the IEBC. But let me start also by saying that from the presentations that have come before me, there is a conclusion that everybody in this room and indeed in this country must make, that the IEBC, as presently constituted, and in light of the shortcomings that were noted in the 2013 general elections, and based on the evidence that was presented during the Supreme Court, part of which have also been presented here, the IEBC cannot be relied upon to conduct free, fair, and peaceful elections in 2017. That is a point that everybody actually must appreciate. And the solution does not, in my opinion, rest in disbanding the commission. The solution rests in reforming the commission. But in order for this to be done, the IEBC must itself avoid the self-denial that it's presently engaged in, including an internal audit on the shortcomings that were caused by the IEBC itself, and also by the officers that were assigned to this commission. The reason why disbandment may not be a solution is the process by appointing the successor commission based on the IEBC Act, but also in the amendment to Article 88 of the Constitution, that I'm sure will be a serious and enormous task given the present composition of the 11th Parliament. As has been pointed out, if you look comparatively in the continent, electoral democracy has been subjected to serious test, rendering or lending credence to the belief that 20 years since the continent reverted to multi-party democracy, very little has been done in terms of democracy consolidation. And the 2013 election that we had was the 5th multi-party election that this country had since the restoration of multi-party democracy in 1991. And from the standpoint of democratization, the 2013 election, and indeed every election that came before it, 92, 97, 202, and 207, pointed to one telling fact, that periodic elections are not by themselves a guarantee for sustainable democracy. In our case, even with the new laws, the new constitutional dispensation, complete with the new set of election laws, the IEBC Act, the Elections Act itself, the Political Parties Act, and now the Election Campaign Act is not a solution. If you look at election in Nigeria, election in Cote d'Ivoire, election in Ghana, one thing came to pass. A cross-cutting trend was that these failed elections over the last decade were characterized by weak institutional and administrative framework in managing these elections in the first place, but also weak legal or electoral dispute resolution mechanism, and that is the judiciary. That is a story that Kenya tells. If you look at the conduct of the IEBC in 2013 election and the conduct of the Supreme Court in the decision that it rendered in petition number 5. Now, IEBC tried against a very challenging election, and only in 3 areas. First, everybody again appreciate the complex and unique nature of what was 2013 election. Holding election in 6 different offices. 2013 election was a transitional election, and as everybody who was participating in the electoral process knows, when an incumbent president is not running, then the stakes are usually high in every transitional election, because everybody believes that they can actually win. And I think that is the projection that we saw in the run-up to 2013, including, by the way, the Honorable Peter Kenneth winning in the social media in terms of the opinion poll and things like that. But 2013 also came against the backdrop of the ICC. So that further heightened the stakes. because of the holding election in 6 different offices, the logistical nightmares that IEBC faced, and also political parties during their nomination, I think all of us can recall very well. The only 3 things that the IEBC did well was, one, is to remember that we had a new electoral process or electoral cycle, beginning with the promulgation of the new constitution all the way up to the resolution of election dispute. And in each and every step, actions of the IEBC on every step was challenged in court. The laws, the delimitation of constituencies, the procurement system, and things like that. But again, they put in a new framework, which was in terms of the delimitation of constituencies, registration of voters, and development of election rules. And then the only other good thing that the IEBC did was the completion of the Secretariat. But this, even with this success, these 2 or 3 success, there were serious, serious problems that were noted. So what were some of the problems with the IEBC? Number 1 was the composition of the IEBC and the relationship between the Commission and the Secretariat. IEBC generated a perception in the run-up to 2013 election that it was a house divided against itself. There were factional camps within the IEBC, pitting the Commission against the Secretariat, generating a perception that there was absolutely nobody that was in charge of the IEBC. Now, political parties, when they sensed this division within the IEBC, moved in to align themselves to various factions. There were some allegations that so-and-so was in the Jubilee camp, and so-and-so was in the CORD camp. And the foregoing development clearly militated against the constitutional and the provisions of the IEBC Act that guarantees functional autonomy into the Commission. They became hostage of the various political interests, and that really was a big problem. The second point was with regard to the procurement of election materials. And in my opinion, this is actually where the rain began beating IEBC. Remember, IEBC was a successor of the IIEC and IIBLC, which had, for all intents and purposes, worked well to gain public trust, given the performance of the ECK in 2007 election. Now, the procurement process, as we remember, was shrouded not only in mystery, but was hijacked by vested interests and, I dare say, big business, or big business and big money interest in the entire procurement process. Now, what happened is the IEBC announced that they were going to embark on the BVR system and actually began the process of the tendering process. Now, before long, the tendering process, the division within the IEBC began to manifest itself, with the IEBC officials preferring or getting swallowed in the various tender wars by the various bidders of the BVR. And then the IEBC chairman eventually then announced that the BVR process had failed. And so they were reverting back to the OMR, the system with optical markers reader, which was the practice, which is what happened in 2007. Now, Cabinet then, the Grand Coalition Cabinet convened an ARED meeting and directed the IEBC to go back to the BVR process and claiming that they were going to embark in the now famous, or is it infamous, government-to-government tender process. Now, by ceding this responsibility with regard to voter registration to the government, then the IEBC immediately then became or operated under the direction of the cabinet. And this again flies against Article 88 of the Constitution and the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission Act. And of course, the price of the BVR then shot from 2 billion, which was the 3 billion, which was the initial projection, to 10 billion. And again, the process of the tendering was continued and things like that. Now, IEBC abdicated its responsibility with regard to the procurement of the BVR. And it should be remembered that abdication of responsibility is what actually led to the ECK being shown the door. And this extended, was not restricted to the BVR only, but extended to the
electronic verification and identification machine. Now, this is part of the reason why the cost of the Kenyan election went that high, as has been pointed out by Sima and Wachira. Now, by comparison, the Kenyan election costed about 40 billion shillings. If you add what Jubilee and CORD spent in that election, the figure might very easily go to 60 billion shillings. Now, the Ghanaian election, the entire election, complete with the BVR and the EV machines and the results transmission machines, was 10.8 billion shillings, an equivalent of 10.8 billion shillings. Now, the entire cost of the Ghanaian election is exactly the cost that the IEBC used to procure the BVR machines alone. One aspect only. Now, in Rwanda, in the 2012 election, the total cost of election in Rwanda was 340 million. Now, that is by far less than 500 million that the IEBC spent in Makueni by election. Voter registration has been, a lot has been said about voter registration, that I don't need to belabor this point. Now, 3 questions must be asked. One, was the register comprehensive and did it cover as many people as possible? And I think from the presentation that Sima gave, the answer is no. Was it an authoritative role? Again, the answer is no. Was it accurate and verifiable? And again, the answer is no. These are the 3 tests with which voter register is examined. And IEBC cannot say that anybody in his right mind can answer this question in the affirmative. And indeed, despite the Supreme Court, as pointed out by Wachira Maina, being very critical about the voter register and saying that it was absolutely not authoritative, proceeded to agree with the IEBC with regard to voter register. Now, this took us to pre-1997 situation, where, by the way, the Elections Act actually defined what a register should be. And this is the benefit that the IEBC has that the ECK before it did not have. And so the Supreme Court could not have purported. What the Supreme Court actually did is moving forward to other elections or subsequent elections, we will have serious problem if this issue of voter registration is not resolved. And why? Because 2007 and 2013 election in this country point out one fact, that rigging will happen at the point of voter registration and at the point of counting, tabulation, and transmission of the result. And the 4th thing that I want to look at briefly is the conduct of the IEBC personnel on election day. And this is the clerks, the POs, the presiding officers, the returning officers, and the county officers. A lot has been said on this. From Sima's presentation, you could see the errors that were committed by the IEBC staff. And this is one of the things that Krigler tried to correct. Because the ECK claimed in 2007 that they did not exercise effective control over their temporary staff. The question is, did IEBC exercise effective control over its returning officers and presiding officers? And other than the data that has been given by Sima, look at the the 188 election petitions that were filed at the various courts. In every election, in every petition, the judges or the magistrates faulted the conduct of the IEBC personnel. In every election, 188 of them. In Bonchari constituency, the person who was declared to have won with 5 votes, upon scrutiny actually lost with 5 votes. Kalembendile's case is very clear as well. Kalembendile was declared to have lost, when in actual sense, it was him who actually won the election. Now, the conduct of the IEBC personnel, you don't even need to look far. It was, as the various courts say, based on the records, on the face of the record. You didn't even have to scratch, you only didn't have to scratch the surface because it was on the face of the record. Now, if you look at the tabulation of the, and the other question is, was the IEBC prepared in this election? Look at what led to the interpretation of valid votes cast. IEBC shows up in Bomas, and then begin to apply valid votes cast, and then somehow they are told that is actually total votes cast, and then they change with that, and then this becomes an issue with the Supreme Court, petition number 3. And I agree with Wachira Maina. The Supreme Court made serious mistake. I mean, the interpretation of valid votes cast or total votes cast, as provided for in Article 138(4), was the least controversial issue that the Supreme Court faced in this petition, and they got it wrong. They relied on three things. One, they failed to spot the mischief that this particular article in the Constitution sought to secure. And the purpose of having it as total votes cast was to cure the mischief that was inherent in the Kenyan election in 92 and 97, when President Moi won in 92 election with 36% of votes, and 97 when he won with 40% of the votes. The intention of this article was to raise the bar of electing president in this country. That was the intention. And when the words of the text of the Constitution was clear and unambiguous as it is in Article 138(4), it was wrong for the Supreme Court to rely on purposive interpretation. Secondly, the Supreme Court relied on Regulation 77 of the Election General Regulation to interpret a constitutional provision. I mean, Oshiro Maina is a constitutional lawyer, and he'll tell you that you don't go that way. You don't use a regulation to interpret a constitutional text. It's absolutely wrong. And then finally, they relied on the Seychelles election. I mean, the precedent set in Seychelles, the Popular Democratic Movement versus the Electoral Commission of Seychelles. Now, for those of you who have been to Seychelles, I've been to Seychelles, but I won't say that I've been there. The total population of Seychelles is 90,000 people. The question is, how could the Supreme Court of Kenya case the future of this country on a unit that small? And it's smaller than Homabay County, by the way, where I come from. How could the Supreme Court of Kenya case the future of this country on a unit that small, when it was established that there's a similar precedent in Croatia that applied total votes cast, which is the practice here. And the issue of threshold is a context issue. That is why in Sierra Leone Constitution, they pitched it at 55%, not 50% plus one, but they made provision for valid votes cast. That if the framers of the Constitution wanted to make it valid votes cast, they would have done that. And as Waida pointed out, the National Assembly and Presidential Elections Act and the old Constitution actually had that. Let me talk briefly about the election day. A lot has been said about the election day. Problems of correcting results by the officials of the IEBC, as was pointed out by Sima, in a number of constituencies. And one thing that has to be pointed out is that IEBC, for the purposes of results transmission, accounting, tabulation, and results transmission, employed three technologies. One was upgraded servers, which was to handle the results. Number two was IEBC relied on Safaricom communication or system to be able to carry these results from the polling stations to the National Counting Center. And then finally, IEBC relied on Google technology for the purposes of displaying these results, both at the polling station and also at the National Counting Center. Now, prior to this, the IEBC went to market and sell technology within the context of our election and assured Kenyans that this technology will work. The chairman actually announced in one of the meetings that the results as counted and displayed in the polling station will be simultaneously relayed to the National Tallying Center. Now, if each and every technology, the three of them, failed on election day, completely. Safaricom later went and said that IEBC actually underutilized the system that they provided. So the question is, was it willful failure, or was it designed to fail, or was it accident? The other question that must be asked is, Ghana adopted the same technology, BVR, results transmission system, and electronic verification devices. Why did it work in Ghana and it failed massively in Kenya in the scale that it failed? Now, very quickly on moving forward, what should the country do in terms of possible areas of reform? Number one, of course, is voter registration. Elections in this country, as was shown in 2013, will be won or lost at the voter registration system. Now, IEBC must first of all conduct and publish the voter register. As has been pointed out, that voter register was inconclusive. nobody can say with certainty, including the IEBC itself, that the voter register that was used in 2013 election was conclusive. And then the other thing that IEBC must do is to embark on continuous but periodic voter registration exercise to enhance transparency and accountability. Look at the year, the IEBC should look at the year and say we are going to conduct a voter registration exercise in February, May, September, like that, and then 1 month for verification. The reason why it must be continuous but periodic is that it enhances transparency. Once they conclude a particular registration phase, they can then publish the results, as opposed to just going in 2017 without that. But also political parties here must demonstrate interest in conducting voter registration and mobilization drive. Now, procurement, IEBC must improve on their procurement system. This is now a subject of the court process, and this is where the rain started beating IEBC. In short, it was a failure. And this actually, the IEBC ceded a very crucial responsibility to the government. Now, with regard to composition of the commission staff, the IEBC must review its structure, but a discussion must be, the country must now have a discussion as to whether they want full-time commissioners or a combination of full-time and part-time, as is happening in Ghana, happening in South African Electoral Commission, and happening in other jurisdictions. On election day, the technologies must work. Washira Maina said, the technology is not a backup of the manual system. It is the other way around. If the IEBC had made a decision to go to the polling, to technology, then they must do that. Then polling stations, there has to be a way of demarcating polling stations that we don't end up with the situation that we ended up with in 2013. Now, with regard to counting of results, the IEBC must abolish constituency tallying centers and counting tallying centers. Article 86B of the Constitution only makes reference to the polling stations. We must count at the polling station. And this is what happened in 2002 election, and this is what happened in 2005 referendum. With regard to presidential election, accounting must happen. To avoid this correction that went all the way up to the constituency and county centers, IEBC must abolish constituency or county tallying centers. And the results posted at the county center, the polling stations, must be relayed simultaneously at the national center. Now, the media must go back to what happened in 2002 and 2005 referendum. Those of you who remember the 2002 elections, the media actually counted and transmitted results. Now, the IEBC came up with a regulation barring the media to rely only on the feeds or the results as they received from the IEBC. In 2002 election, Kivwitu made the announcement. The country generally relied on, one, the provisional results, and two, the results as was relayed by the media. And this is what is happening in the United States. The American president election is known long before the Electoral Commission publishes their result. The media, unless they insist on accepting and moving on, the media must go back to transmitting the results. One, because the IEBC results transmission system was a failure, and the country cannot then rely on a failed results transmission system. And then finally is on the election dispute resolution. The KPTJ, IEBC has the Constitution of Kenya and the Elections Act gives a jurisdiction for the IEBC to determine elections petitions. Now, this jurisdiction and this obligation, in my opinion, is a bit misplaced, given the enormous task that the IEBC deals with in terms of managing 6 different elections. And now, the Election Campaign Finance Act has added additional responsibilities to the IEBC. Now, as was demonstrated in the Kathy Kilonzo's case, the IEBC returning officer clears a candidate, and then the IEBC dispute tribunal sits to determine the actions of omission or commission of its own official. Secondly, there are other bodies that are now sharing that jurisdiction. The Political Parties Dispute Tribunal, and the High Court. Now, the reading of the jurisdiction that IEBC has with regard to resolving disputes in nomination does not extend after an IEBC official has issued a certificate. There has to be a clarification on this. And secondly, this jurisdiction should actually be located either to the Political Parties Dispute Tribunal or to the High Court. I thank you.